Hey guys, this is Max Headspace 9mm, and I got my Gen 3 Glock 17 here for you to look over. Now, this is one of the most reviewed firearms on all of YouTube. What could I say about this that hasn't already been said? Well, I think I've got a few things. If you stay tuned and are patient, you'll hear some things you probably never heard before from me. But I was thinking about this gun and empty. And the thing about this that is so interesting to me, almost more so than the gun itself, is the culture of this firearm. People come to love these guns for a very specific reason. Almost everybody starts out hating Glocks in the beginning. You go to a big gun store and you look at the pistols that are in the glass case, and you've got the gun store worker leaning over the case wanting to help you. And you're looking at all the different options, and this is probably, to the newcomer to firearms, one of the least attractive guns in the case. It's not fancy. It doesn't have all kinds of fancy polish and bells and whistles and gadgets and gizmos. It's just a very smooth, simple, almost ugly, simplistic gun. Easily overlooked by the beginner. But these are the firearms that a lot of people in gun culture who have had a lot of experience with firearms eventually are drawn to. Why is that? Well, that's what I want to talk about today, and that's what a lot of people don't mention in reviews of these things. So, just for a little bit of point of reference, I have here my Generation 1. This is a Generation 1. This is a Hogue rubber grip. See, back in the day when Generation 1 came out, and it was this legendary gun that Bruce Willis said was made out of ceramic and couldn't be metal detected in airports, it had this sort of mystique to it. It was a cop gun. It was a, spy gun. It was a gun for special forces. And to the rest of us in the gun community, civilians, it was looked at as just this ugly plastic gun. I mean, who wants a gun that is made mostly out of plastic? That just seems like a step that most people don't want to cross over, especially back when primarily most people's association with firearms and handguns was revolvers at the time. Back in the days when this came out and was issued to police officers, revolvers were very, very popular, and they probably were the dominant handgun of the day. The way that Glock got these into the hands of police officers, it made a lot of sense. And eventually, after a while of police carrying these and people seeing them on the hip of police officers, relating to them as a reliable firearm with very high capacity, they began to change their opinion about what a plastic pistol could be. Well, back in the day, Hogue, as it is usually capable of doing, came up with a very nice solution, and that is this rubber grip. The Gen 1 is, I will tell you, when I got this, it didn't have this on it. This is a very slippery grip. If you're sweaty or anything at all, a few shots, and this thing starts to require you to get a better grip on it. Well, the Hogue grip solves that problem. It's a $10 fix. It makes a Gen 1 feel as good or better than a Gen 3. The Gen 2 also did not have finger grooves, but they did increase the amount of texturing on the grip. And then when Gen 3 came out, like this one here, one of the most common complaints that people had, and I see it even today when I go shooting with friends and I let them shoot my Gen 3, I'm used to hearing it about maybe 30 or 40% of the time, oh, it doesn't fit my hand. Well, I jokingly say you need to get better hands. But the truth of the matter is these finger grooves and this grip doesn't fit everybody's hand. Some people like a single stack. And if that's you, great, go to it. I absolutely require high capacity in all my firearms. So for me, a double stack, high capacity, and this was at one time a very high capacity gun. I've learned to custom my grip to this pistol. When I first fired a friend's Glock 40 caliber version of this, 22, Glock 22, I didn't like the way the grip felt. It felt like I was holding a 2x4. But after a while, I realized, I just better get used to this because, that's what is required. It's not so much that the finger grooves aren't where I want them. It's just wide, that's all. And it feels kind of square in the hand. But if you lock your thumb onto this little ridge that they provide and push down, somehow the grip feels a lot better to me. So this one has night sights. They're brand new tritium night sights, and they're Glock. They have the Glock logo on them. Got this at Glock store. And for the most part, this is a pretty standard setup. Everything's in really good shape because I don't put a ton of use on this. It's interesting how they etched this little stamp in here. That's a new thing I've noticed. I guess that's a serial number code in there. But for the most part, these haven't changed too much. Most of the modifications they've done to the design have been very subtle, so you can use the same parts generation after generation for the most part. And I think the Gen 3 is my favorite personally. I really like it. I'll show you. Comes apart very easy. And I think the strength of the Glock is simplicity and capacity. I have a lot of fun with my son competing to see who can field strip this firearm the fastest and then reassemble it and dry fire it. We do that with no ammunition anywhere within arm's reach. We check and recheck to make sure that this is unloaded, but it is a really neat exercise to get you familiar with speed stripping this gun. Now, this is one of those firearms that you have to dry fire in order to break it down. You just have to get used to that. And it's not a big deal once you realize. This trigger, I really like this trigger a lot. So if you notice, the trigger is back. It's all the way back. That's a visual cue that the striker is not under string pressure. If you cock it, and also this is flat. The extractor is actually flat. It's actually inside. It's inside of the slide. So watch the trigger. The trigger moved forward. That is the indicator. That's all you need to indicate that the striker is under spring tension right now. And you can tell this hasn't pooched out at all, so there is no bullet in here. But if it were sticking out so that you could actually feel it sticking out beyond the slide, I would realize there is a round in the chamber. So that's how you know. These are really subtle things, but people who use Glocks are aware of these things that you read. Okay, what is the strong point of this gun? This has been carried by militaries and police all around the world. It's proven itself as reliable. The strong point of the Glock17, and pretty much any generation of Glock, is concealed carry. You can carry this in an outside the waistband holster. There's no problem with that whatsoever. But for the civilian that wants to put this inside the waistband, this is a dream come true. A lot of firearms that look a lot flashier under glass in the counter at a gun store, they have, things that stick out on them. The breakdown lever, the slide release, the mag release, maybe a safety. All these different things on most firearms are much more pronounced. And that looks really good, and it makes it easier to manipulate those things under pressure. But the truth of the matter is, all those things that poke out, you feel them when you're carrying this gun close to your side. I can tuck this gun inside the waistband easily and carry it more comfortably than guns that are much smaller, like my Springfield XDs. Those are guns that I definitely do not feel as comfortable carrying inside the waistband, and even significantly smaller guns are more uncomfortable than the Glock. So all that smoothness, all that stuff that just doesn't stick out beyond the sides of the firearm, it's really designed that way because it makes the gun more carryable. Yeah, it looks kind of cheap, but there's a method to the madness. There's a purpose behind all that. And when you fire this a lot and you practice with it quite a bit, you begin to realize all these things are just what they need to be. They're a bit minimal, but you can definitely operate everything. Everything works. Everything does what it's supposed to. It's just perfect. It just requires a little bit of training and getting used to. That's all. It's a really great gun. And it grows on you. And that's what it's done to a lot of people. A lot of people are much more excited about this gun after they've fired a lot of other guns. And they begin to realize the unique advantages to this firearm. Like, for instance, really high capacity magazines. This is 33 rounds. Why would anybody need that? I don't know. It's just more is better. That's the mindset. Doesn't mean somebody's a killer or they're a mass murderer because they don't want to reload as often. But this is a very carryable magazine and very reliable too. I've never had a single issue with any of these Glock brand 33 round magazines. I have never bought any other brand. I know they exist, but I'm not interested in tempting fate. I buy only Glock magazines. And that's all I can recommend to you. Now, this is a gun that I do carry in the winter time, inside the waistband. I have a holster for outside the waistband. If I'm going to a shooting range or something, or if I'm out in the woods, I can put this on and carry it outside the waistband, and it's fantastic. But in the wintertime, if I want to carry this, and I can put it in a minimal holster like this, outside the waistband, and it's quite comfortable and simple. Also, if, for instance, the weather is not quite so permitting of carrying a full-size gun like this, because this does require more layers of shirts or sweaters or jackets to cover up. You know, say it's t-shirt weather. What if it's summertime? Well, this is my summertime gun. And I have a pocket holster that I use much of the time. See, there's my ammo's in there, but it is unloaded. So this gun is a lot smaller than that 17. This is a Glock 26. I skipped right over the Glock 19. With both of these, there's not much need for me to get a 19. Great gun, but I've never needed a mid-step between these two. So what's the difference between these two? Well, plenty actually. A lot of the same parts are interchangeable between the two. But it looks like, as you can tell, for the most part, Glock simply cut an inch off of the barrel and an inch off of the grip. And that makes this gun much more concealable. I can carry this in my pocket all day long with comfort. No problem at all. Also, you might notice the front of the gun has these chamfers. And that does make a difference, you know? It just doesn't poke out as much as this square front end, you know? There's more to the corners on this. It just seems to be a little bit more, you know, of a sidearm rather than a pocket carry gun. But all the holsters that work for the 17 also work for the 26. And yes, I do carry this in this holster sometimes too, because this one has all the capacity of that one. I can put my Glock 17 magazine in this one. I can put my Glock 18 machine gun magazine in this one. It is completely the most perfect little firearm that I've ever found because it's completely adaptable. It'll do everything that this one will do. So why would anybody carry this at all? Well, that's a good question. About the only advantage that this has over this is a slight difference in sight radius, about an inch further apart is the sights, and you get a rail on here, which was not present in the Gen 1. That's something that they added. So the rail is kind of nice if you have lights or lasers or anything like that, which I do. But other than that, there really isn't any difference. For the most part, it's the same exact gun, just smaller and more concealable. So if you have to get just one, if you can't afford to get two for summer and winter, I would recommend just the Glock26. It'll do almost everything that this will do just as well. As far as accuracy and capacity and everything, it's just about as good. You lose probably about 50 feet per second because of the shorter barrel. But that's really a pretty small loss. You won't even really notice it in almost every circumstance. So that is pretty much what I have to say about the Glock 26 and 17, primarily the 17. They're fantastic guns. They hold their value. They last really well. They're easy to clean. They're easy to upgrade. They are not the cheapest, but they are by far, far from the most expensive handgun that you can buy. And they are probably the most adaptable of all of the firearms. Now, I am not really fond of the textures that they're putting on the guns now. I have an FN 45 that has a really aggressive texture, but that is clearly not an inside the waistband gun. Any gun that I'm going to carry inside the waistband, this is the texture that I can live with. A really aggressive texture is just uncomfortable. And one of the things I'm going to say in closing is it is my opinion for myself, and I would recommend this to new people considering concealed carry. Having an exposed safety is not a good idea for most people considering concealed carry. Now, why is that? Well, if a safety protrudes enough that you can use it quickly in an emergency situation, it's also going to protrude enough to accidentally be disengaged when you're carrying it close to your body, like inside the waistband. For that reason, I don't think having a safety on a concealed carry pistol is a good idea. If it is one of those safeties that's really flush, designed, to be minimal so that you can do that, it's also going to be harder to activate. I've had guns like that and I've gotten rid of them because they are too difficult to engage or they disengage too easily. So I can't be absolutely positive of the condition of my firearm at all times because the safety is either too difficult or too easy. I've never found one that worked perfectly. It just adds one layer of complexity and unknown to your concealed carry regimen. So I would rather have a gun with no safety at all and be aware of its condition that way than to have one extra element that confuses things. So that's just a little food for thought, and it is my personal opinion. You decide for yourself because ultimately it is up to you every bullet that leaves the firearm. That is your responsibility, and we all have to take that responsibility seriously. This is Max Headspace 9mm. Have a good one. If you like this video, go ahead and consider hitting the like button. If it's your first time watching, go ahead and subscribe. And if you want to support me and my channel, go check out my Patreon. The link is in the description.